Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Plews, and I'm the General Secretary for the Swiss Faculty Development Network. I'm making this, or I'm re-recording this webinar in order to share with our members some quick tips and tricks on how to stimulate engagement in an online context. The objective of this video isn't to show you or to give you ideas of how to totally transition your courses to online. The idea is just more to share ideas to make the environment a bit more comfortable for yourself and for your students. I'm choosing to use Adobe Connect because in Switzerland we have Switch and you can log in to Adobe Connect through your Switch AAI account. However, if you don't have Switch, you could easily take these ideas and transition them, make them work in a different tool. So I originally did this webinar back in September of 2018, and yesterday I was actually talking about it, and someone said to me, do you have a recording? We could share it with the members. It would be great. And unfortunately, the first thing I forgot to do during that session was to hit the record button. So in Adobe Connect, just go to your meeting tab and make sure that you record the session as long as it's something that you want to record. And in terms of what's going on now with the coronavirus, and if you're doing this for your students, you're in all likeliness going to want to record your session. When the video first started, we saw this entry space. And the entry space, the welcome lobby, is one of the simplest and easiest features. I love using this to kind of welcome my students into a space where they know that they're going to be learning, and we'll look at that quickly in just a minute. Here is the welcome lobby I set up for our session, or this recording. And here's the meeting timer. This is something that I absolutely love. You can get lots of ideas and support from Adobe Connect's website. They also have a lot of technical videos. So if you're someone who likes an idea and thinks I'm going a bit too fast, you can go to Adobe Connect and look at the various different videos that they have for the technical aspects. But the countdown to meeting, you just pick how many minutes you're going to start it, and I had to hit stop. Let's see, we'll start it, and the countdown starts. I also have a welcome message over here on the left-hand side to let the students know I'm here, I'm available. Please do your audio setup wizard. The audio setup wizard, you can send this information by email in advance, but of course, things always change with our technology, our computers, our audio, our sound. It's very important right before your session is supposed to start that your students can all hear and see you, and hear and possibly see each other. It also shows the students that there is some type of presence on the part of the instructor. One of the great features about the lobby, welcome lobby, is that you can, and you can do this in any of the layouts for Adobe, you can put your own picture in there. In order to do that, you click on meeting, you go to preferences, and in general preferences, you'll see room appearance and background. So I've uploaded a picture of me in action during an actual physical face-to-face workshop, and it allows my students to see me before they're going to be seeing me online, even though they can't see me in person. And here we have the sound clip that I had going on during that welcome session, welcome lobby. Another question you might have is, why on earth is she wearing an old school headset? And working at home, there are lots of noises, lots of distractions. I don't have a studio. It's very important to me to make sure that I can be heard and that the background noise behind me, which is mainly my dogs barking, can be eliminated. When we're teaching at home, in the upcoming weeks, we're probably going to have our spouse, our partner, our families, our pets all around us. So using a headset, this one I bought 5 years ago, is around $30. So it wasn't a big investment on my part. Of course, if you have a professional microphone, use that. But this is something that's kind of a quick fix. So this original webinar was delivered in 3 parts. It was an hour long, and like all of my workshops, there was a bit of theory, and it was theory on webinars, what are the purposes, and when I'm using the word webinar now, we're going to think of a course or a class or a session. After the bit of theory, we moved into the interactive, the hands-on moment of the session, where my participants were actually able to try out some of these tools. I was able to give them host or presenter rights, and they can go in and try some of the things we were talking about. And lastly, we had this questions and debate session, part of the session. So everyone could turn on their microphone and talk and discuss. And we're going to talk about various possibilities for interaction, because it's also going to depend on the size of your class and setting expectations for how and when students will participate. I'm going to skip through the theory part for the most part and focus just on the interactive tools, the tips and tricks, so you'll have some practical things to take away with you after this video, and so that the video won't be extremely long. After I've presented a little bit of theory, I like to have a pause and check in with the audience. In order to do that in Adobe, it's quite simple. I use the poll feature, and in order to access that, you would click on Pods and go to Poll. And now you should be able to see it. Polls you can prepare in advance, so you can tell yourself, okay, this is a good stopping point for me. As we know, if we're just standing, talking, and lecturing, it can get very boring for our learners, or our learners can get easily distracted, and especially when they're not sitting right in front of us. So this poll, I said, okay, what component of virtual learning seems the most complicated? I just wanted to get a sense of, after I was speaking, what the participants or the learners thought. And pretty much you can have the answers and then broadcast the results in real time. I'll click that away now. So I said I want to talk about theory, so in order for us to focus on the more practical aspects of delivering online courses and content, but I do want to draw your attention to this prep model. So in an ideal world, there are multiple phases to developing online learning. And really, planning is one of the most important. Not only do you have to plan for your content and activities and assessment, you also need to learn a little bit about the platform. So whether you're using Adobe Connect or Zoom or Skype for Business or any of those tools, if it's your first time using the tool, it can be a little bit disorienting. It's not always easy. And one of the things that is ideal is if you have a buddy next to you who can help troubleshoot if there's problems that come up. I'm going to give you some tips for that a bit later on. So normally there's a planning phase, then a rehearsal phase. And the rehearsal phase would be we set up a time with colleagues, a fake set of learners who are going to be there and give you feedback, and so you can feel more at ease in delivering and in navigating these different pods, and in also monitoring all the activity that's going on. Finally, you'd execute and then a post-session review. With the way things are going this week, last week, next week, who knows, it's much more important to, or I don't want to say it's more important to, a lot of us are being forced to just jump into online learning. We may have some handouts, worksheets, workshops, but the idea is that educational developers, faculty developers are having to get teachers ready to teach online, essentially without the planning and rehearsal phase. So we're jumping into the execute. One of the things I can tell you that's the most important is focus on the execution and the post-session review. Today, you're delivering a course online, maybe for the first time. Tomorrow, you're going to be doing it again. Or later this afternoon, you're going to be doing it again. It might be the same course, or it might be a different course. So in the post-session review, after you've recorded the session, you can go back and watch how the class went. And watch in terms of yourself, but also in terms of what's going on with your students. And this will help you to improve for the next session. I know personally that I use a lot of ums and so's. It's something that I'm always constantly working on. I may not be perfect during my online sessions, but I'm at least trying to improve. Later on, when you have more time, you can definitely come back to this model and look at it in more detail in terms of the various phases of online planning. Interactive features. The lobby, a warm welcome. I'm just going to click back to this original screen that I had, and I had a bit of music. Why do I want to have an online lobby? For me, when I'm in the classroom, I arrive early, I'm there with everything set up, and I'm there to welcome my students, to say hello, to see how they're doing. And in the online environment, it's a little bit different. We might just get right to work. But a welcome lobby, the lobby feature, it's very easy to do. All you do is create a new layout. You upload the background. You have a little pod that says, please check your audio and visual. Make sure your computer's working. Make sure you're ready. I'm here to help. And then you have the timer saying that, okay, class is going to start in 10 minutes, and it counts down. It allows the student to take care of any last-minute issues, and it also prepares them, letting them know that they're going to start the learning experience in a short amount of time. So setting the tone for learning, it's a very easy, nice feature, and it also allows you to showcase a bit of who you are depending on what type of image you want to use in the background. And I had those two examples of one with me, where I'm actually facilitating a workshop, and one with just a more professional blank background. Welcome to the SFDN webinar series. Content sharing. That's exactly what I'm doing with these presentation slides. In order to share content, you would just click on the pod and the share tab. And you could share PowerPoint slides, you could share PDFs, you could share Word documents, pretty much anything that you would be able to share online or on your screen in the classroom or your interactive whiteboard, you can also share through Adobe Connect. With screen sharing is always possible. Sometimes, depending on your institution and your kind of computer access restrictions, you might not be able to share your screen. So that's something to definitely address with IT before, because there's lots of benefits to screen sharing. Sometimes you want to pull up a website or just get out of a traditional presentation. I noticed that I have a problem with screen sharing, and I'm clearly at home, so I don't have access to IT services to help me change the computer settings. Yes, they could log in from far away, but I figured, okay, let me just try to find an alternative. And my alternative was just to create a web links pod, and you do that by going to pods, click on web links, add new web links, and this pod pops up with the website that I wanted to use for my students. So they can click right on this link and a web page will open up, which will allow them to engage in an activity outside of Adobe Connect but one that we can come back to and talk to. In the ideal world, you'll have screen sharing, so it'll all be recorded and it'll stay in there. But as you're working in an online context, it's very important to think of alternatives in case your first option doesn't work. So I'm going to go and hide that. Audio. When thinking about audio, of course, you think about you speaking to your audience, but you also have to keep your students or participants in mind. A lot of times, if you're delivering a short lecture or a bit of content, you probably want to have the participant microphones muted. Just as you can have background noise, they could also have background noise if they're eating a sandwich or having a drink, or if something's going on in the background in their homes. So it can get very noisy. So I would suggest muting the participant microphones. However, you also want to encourage audio because it gives sound. It gives a voice to the students. So one kind of strategy is plan for when you're going to allow or permit audio interactions. And we'll see later on breakout rooms. We'll also see instant feedback where students can raise their hands or ask questions. But at the beginning of your session, if you have an agenda established, you can let the students know when you'll take questions, when you'll be looking at the chat box if they're typing in their questions, and when they will be able to engage verbally. And then we get to the chat box. So the chat box is right here on the left-hand side, and this is great because not only can your students send questions or chat with you, they can also chat with one another individually. The one word of caution I have with the chat is also to set a certain guideline for when you're going to pause and look at the chat room. For example, if you have 150 students or even 50 students and their various students are chatting or asking questions all throughout the session, it can be very difficult to deliver and also to monitor. If you have a teaching assistant or a tech buddy who can sit and help you, that's great because they can kind of quickly point your attention to the chat box if there's an urgent issue. But it's not always easy to follow. So for kind of emergencies, we're going to talk about instant feedback later on if your students really need to stop you. But in the meantime, it's nice to set a protocol to say, okay, I'm going to check the chat box when you're doing this activity. And I'll summarize the most common questions. And if we don't get to questions later on, I'll address them in another video for all of you. The drawing and pointer tools, that's part of the share function. And if you want to highlight content or you want to be able to draw on your slides so they're not so static, all you do is click on the draw button and it'll allow you to draw in different colors. It'll allow you to type. You can use this to highlight any definite main points, anything that you want the students to focus on, or as you're talking or as you're speaking, if there's something in particular that you want to add or that they should pay attention to. Polls we already talked about, but one quick tip is that it's very important. You can organize your polls in advance and plan for them. But I always encourage faculty members to have a backup poll. And what I mean by that is inevitably there's going to be some challenges with technology, whether it's on your end, whether it's on student end. It's important not to stop and leave the students guessing as to what's going to happen next. So I always have an open-ended question poll ready and available that I can issue to the students and say, think about this, type in your response, and we're going to come back and discuss it after I fix this technical difficulty. This way they're not losing their train of thought in their learning, and you are able to give them something to do, not have them just simply waiting around for you or potentially losing them because they think the class is going to end. So polls definitely you could have your plan for at certain points during the presentation, but always keep it in mind to have an emergency poll. Instant feedback. Instant feedback is one of the ways to quickly gauge what's going on with your audience. So up on the dashboard, your students or your participants, they can raise their hand. You can ask them, as I stated before, they could do these things at any point in time, or you can say during a certain period we're going to have Q&A, or we're going to encourage audio interaction, audio questions. But at any time your participants, they can raise their hand. You can do a quick, do you agree, do you disagree? They can ask you to speak louder, speak softer, speed up, slow down, and there could also be laughter and applause. So this kind of gives a more humanistic side to the technology. You won't see everyone. They might see and hear you, but you could quickly ask them, how's it going? And get an idea to make sure everyone is on track. In the classroom, you would normally see them, so that's not really an issue. But here, it's nice to implement one or two checks intermittently during the session in order to really kind of say, I'm here, but how are you? Breakout rooms, a great function for group work. When I started teaching online back in, I believe it was 2007, it was more directive, asynchronous interaction. Today, and especially that universities are moving to online teaching during this pandemic, we're going to see more and more synchronous teaching. And breakout rooms is something that will allow us to kind of replicate or transition in-class activities to online. The breakouts feature is quite simple to use. You'll have the attendee list, and right now it's just me because I'm re-recording this without any actual visitors or participants. But normally you'd have a list of participants. And what you would do is click on this second little button, Breakout Room View. And Adobe gives you 3 breakout rooms by default, but you can add and adjust the number based on how many students you have. When you want the breakouts to start, you can click Evenly Distribute from the main number of participants. So you don't need to go in and assign students to a particular breakout room. Adobe will just distribute it randomly. They'll go away and work, and if I click on Start Breakouts, during the breakout sessions, you as the faculty member or instructor will have the possibility to visit the different breakout rooms just by clicking on and entering them, but you'll also have the possibility to broadcast a message. And this can be simple as a check-in question. This can be, are you on the right track? And it can also be a signal, there's only 5 minutes left before we regroup together. These two kind of ideas, you entering the breakout rooms or broadcasting messages, help establish that presence. It's letting the participants know that you are there, that you are around. If you have a large group of students, you may not be able to visit every single breakout room, but the broadcast message feature allows you to show that you are there, you are monitoring what's happening and what's going on. To end breakouts, all you would do is click End Breakouts. I'm not going to go through all of these different exercises. However, I do have a handout that will be available with the link to this video. And the handout is more ideas for interaction, but also ideas for icebreakers. As we, as educational developers and faculty members, are maybe learning how to teach online overnight or attempting to transition our courses to online, we also have to remember that our students really might not be used to this format of learning. So we have to help them, number one, get comfortable with the environment, and then number two, learn how to learn online. So there's lots of different ideas of activities that you could do and things that can encourage engagement just like you would do in the classroom. If for some reason you have a small group, and when I did the original webinar, I only had 4 participants. So it was a very small group. I didn't feel the need to have breakout rooms. So you can always move the layouts in the different pods. Adobe gives you kind of this sharing pod, a discussion pod, and a collaboration pod. But everything, as you can see, you can move around, you can resize it, and it's quite easy to adapt and to have different layouts on your right-hand dashboard so you can switch between, which was what I was doing earlier in the session with the welcome lobby and moving into our sharing pod. So partner chat, I had a small number of participants, so I basically had 2 chat screens opened. I assigned 2 students to each chat, and that allowed them to engage with one another, but also be able to see what was going on with the other group. And that's something that sometimes students give us feedback that it's great to do group work, but we don't always get to see what's going on in all the other discussion sessions or all the other exercises that the other students are doing. So if it's a small group, you can use this option, just have the share screen with 2 chat windows opened up, 2 or 3. But at the end, you can also, and I encourage you to have the possibility to have a formal closing where you can integrate some of the ideas that were discussed. This particular webinar was for faculty developers, so it wasn't such a formal setting, but that's okay. Here you could see that someone wrote, "I will dare to try now." Thanks a lot, Rachel. And the idea was just to get people comfortable with the technology, but also with the various interactions that can happen online. In this the closing pod, you see the chat. I turned off the webcam at this point because I actually had the whiteboard larger, and I encouraged them to type or draw, and as you can see, we have just some little scribbles. But I also had a pod that had my file sharing. There's a pod that's specific to file sharing, and you could choose to do this in the beginning or at the end, and it's important, in my opinion, to have the files that you would normally distribute to your students, such as PowerPoint slides or any type of class handouts, in the Adobe system. If you send things by email, it has the potential to get lost or missed because the students, especially now, are receiving quite a large number of emails, I would imagine. So when they log into the system, if they have access straight away to the materials, or if you want them to wait until the end of the session to have the files, you can have it at the end. For this session, I had it at the end, but most of the time I would provide it to my students in that my little welcome screen, so they could download everything and have it right in front of their faces if they wanted to annotate and take notes as we were moving through the session. I hope that I've provided some different types of tips and tricks within Adobe Connect, and I've given you some ideas to think about that can really encourage interaction as you are working with faculty members, or if you're a faculty member yourself, to try and quickly adjust to online learning context. I'm hopeful that we're going to also record this video in French for our French-speaking colleagues sometime over the next week. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best for moving your courses online, for dealing with this time of crisis and potential difficulty for not only educators, but also for our students. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and otherwise, I wish you a great day. Bye now.